should be live pretty soon here. It's about less than 60 seconds until 6, and then I will get going. I'm very excited for today's lesson. It's something that's a bit newer to me, what I've learned, but it's really helpful once you get the hang of it. Just checking on the time to make sure. See, Terry's here. Hello. And it's 6 o'clock. Fantastic. All right, so let's get going. So today's lesson is all about curve brushes and how to use them. They're really, oh, let's see, Terry says I have quite an echo going on. Let me try and fix an audio issue first before I get the lesson rolling well. Let's see. Yeah, I am getting my desktop back next week. I'm very excited about it. So we'll get rid of any technical issues. Why I haven't been live streaming a lot recently. Val's here, looking forward to curve brushes. I am also excited. Give me like a minute here while I try and quickly troubleshoot this. I guess it's just Terry. Everyone else is good. Sorry about that, but I'm glad that the audio is okay for everyone else, so I'll just get rolling then. Alright guys, so it's all about curve brushes, what we're doing. So curve brushes are notoriously tricky because ZBrush will overcorrect, but there's a bunch of different tiny settings that you can adjust, and essentially that's how to properly use curve brushes. So a couple tutorials I'll go over with you guys here, so let's get to it. The first part of this lesson is just about how to use curve brushes. So I have my custom UI set up, but again, the custom UI is not helping this lesson in any way. You can follow along just fine with the standard UI. So if I click B as in boy for brush palette, or B as in brush, you have a bunch of different brushes here by default. A lot of these are custom ones I put in here. But for sure, you guys will have the curve snap brush. So drawing a curve is pretty simple. You just select the brush and then just draw like you normally would on your model. But the issue comes in when you want to move it around. So, or continue it. So I'll show you both of those. If you want to start moving it around, just grab one of the ends. I have solo turned on. Just grab one of the ends and start pulling it. Now it's very, very sensitive, and as you noticed, it's going to kind of flip around. It might not react quite the way. See how it's turning on itself? So the best way to use curve brushes is by very, very small and like gentle adjustments is the best way I can suggest it. And now if you want to continue the curve, you need to hover by the end, not touching your tablet. Draw out just a tiny bit and see that red line? That's how you know you can continue the curve. This used to infuriate me to no end because I didn't see the red line. I didn't know what I was doing. So again, if you want to continue the curve, make sure that that red line right there is popping up. Otherwise, you're just going to be dragging it around. So that's a very, very simple demo of curve strap brush. Let me start doing some actually practical applications because it pretty much changes based on what you're doing. So I have a hair brush here from an artist I really admire, Danny Mac. I think this brush was like $3 or something. Highly recommend it. If you guys want to see where to get it, I can link it in the Discord after the lesson. So I have a bunch of different options here. I just have the first one selected. And let's say if I want to just drag a strand of hair. So there we go. See how it's kind of, it's stuck to her face and it had to like snap back out. Essentially what you do is you can tap the edge. And by default, this brush is also anchored. That has to do with the type of brush that it is. There's a few other things I want to let you guys know about. So if you go to Picker and then go to Depth, you either have once Z or continuous Z. So essentially for once Z, it's going to stay away from the model. Continuous Z is on by default. And so I'll show you guys the difference here. So see how it's like sticking to her head? That can be okay for shorter hairstyles, but if you're doing like a longer hairstyle, it's very weird that it's sticking all the way down to her neck. So if you just go to Picker and then go to once Z and try and do the same thing, you'll see that it doesn't stick to her neck. It kind of sinks into her head, but if you just tap the model, that will help. Also note that when you do curve brushes, that the rest of your model is naturally going to be masked. So if you hit split mask points, which is under subtool, you can have that hair piece as a different piece. You can go ahead, grab your little 3D gizmo by clicking W, Alt to move it around. And then a really cool trick that I like is holding Control and dragging, and you can duplicate it a bunch of times. This is actually not how I do hair for a lot of reasons, but it can be a very, very strong tool if you do want to do hair this way and have it really high detail. So that was my quick hair demo. Let's do another demo, just because, again, with curved brushes, the applications really change in the way that you use it based on what you're trying to do. So let's say I want to give her a simple bandana. There's a really cool trick with that as well. So if I go back to my curve snap strap brush, I feel like I'm saying that weird. What is it actually called? Curve strap snap. Okay, that's what it is. And if I wanted to draw a bandana, it's kind of tricky because once you start going around the model and curving to where you can't see it as well, it starts to kind of fold back on itself. So the best way to do it is to do a small increment, get your little line again, and continue like this. Now this is one way to do it, but it's a little tedious and it's really uneven. What you actually want to do is grab your cursor, drag a line straight out, and then on your keyboard, click the buttons Control and Shift. When you do this, you'll start to get all these little lines showing up. This will actually loop the curve brush all the way around the model. Oh wow, that's a funny glitch. That doesn't happen. But you get what it's supposed to do. So, two things here. One, curve brushes are unpredictable. This is a good example. And two, notice how there's actually like two different layers here? That's because I had symmetry turned on. So if you actually want to do this, I would suggest turning off symmetry. You can go to Transform and click Activate Symmetry, or you can click X on your keyboard to turn it off. So now when I go through and try this, I gotta kind of play with where the orientation is at. There you go. Much, much better. It works the way that's supposed to. As you notice, you kind of have to go through it a couple of times because it tends to be very finicky. That's a demonstration. So now you guys have briefly seen like how to use a hairbrush and then how to use like belts or doing something like a bandana. Now that I've worked through like how to use the brushes, again, you kind of just draw it on there. You can move it around or you can continue it. That's what we've covered so far. Now let's talk about how to actually make brushes. So for this tutorial, I already have two pieces that have been made. They look absolutely identical, but there's two very small differences, and I'll go over that in just a second. So this piece right here, all I did was import a cube. I squished it. This is kind of a cool trick if you guys don't already know this. If you hold Control and drag a box to mask, if you then hold spacebar, you can move this little box around wherever you want. It's kind of handy. So that's pretty much how I made this. Once you have a piece that you'd like to repeat and use as a brush, click on B for the brush palette again, and go to Create Insert Mesh. Go ahead and click New for the most part. Append will just add it to the brush that you're using, and I don't want to add this to my Move brush. I'm not going to click New actually because I already have made this brush. So if you click on New, it will be the last brush in your brush palette right here. So let's go back to the female head, and let me undo some settings really quick. Make sure that this is doing what I want it to. Cool. So this is what your brush is going to do by default when you make a new brush. It'll show up right here when you have it selected, and pretty much, actually it's keeping curve mode off, and pretty much it's just going to draw a bunch of little duplicates or boxes of what you had. Now obviously this is not a curved brush, so how do you make it a curved brush? What you're going to want to do is go to Stroke and then click on Curve Mode. One second. I need to actually duplicate this because it's going to do the right example. One second. It's going to do the correct thing, and I want to show you what it'll do the first time when you guys try it. Alright, here we go. So what you do is to make it a curve brush is go to Stroke and then click on Curve Mode. When this is activated, you'll see it's going to draw a bunch of different little blocks. So it's going to like kind of loop them together. There we go. Now, this is not what I would ever want for my curve brush probably, so I thought this was really weird that this was the default that ZBrush has, because it's just a bunch of objects next to each other. I would want it to be one continuous piece. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So there's two things you have to do. You have to make it a triparts brush, and you'll see why I actually had to duplicate my object here and make another one really quickly. So let's go back to the original piece. If you clicked on Shift F, you'll see I have it in 3 different sections here. Now the way that you do that is go ahead and mask part of your model and then hit Control W. You'll see that changes its color. So essentially, to make a curve brush, you need to have 3 different pieces or 3 different poly groups. What happens is this top part will be the beginning piece and the bottom here being the end cap. And it's going to stitch all of these center pieces together to make one continuous nice stream. So let's go ahead and check that out. I'll go back to my head, and I've made that a brush as well. I believe it was this one. Making sure that curve mode is turned on under stroke. And then here's the tricky part. You have to go to brush and then go to modifiers. And there are a bunch of different pieces here. By default, only triparts will be highlighted. You're going to want to put weld points and stretch. It just helps it like piece together better. And I'll talk about that as well because it's probably not going to do what I want it to the first time. I'll have them turned off by default right now to show you what will happen normally. So see what happened where it's trying to piece them together, but it's not quite doing what I want it to. That's what I was talking about. I actually messed with this for a few hours last night and struggled a bunch with it, so hopefully you guys don't have to. And I troubleshooted this the best that I could. So one of the ways to fix these gaps is to go to Brush, Modifiers, and then click on Weld Points and Stretch. This will help it a little bit. It's still kind of blocky, but it definitely did a much better job than before. Another thing you can do is max out curve res and max angle bend. This will also help it look a bit smoother. There we go, look how much nicer that looks. If I clicked on Shift and F, you will see again that you have that beginning cap and end cap. So yeah, not too bad overall. I'm sorry there was a little bit of confusion there because I know I jumped around because I realized I had the wrong piece saved. I had my modified brush, not just what it looks like by default. Because again, by default, ZBrush just makes a bunch of different blocks together. And that's because, again, my test piece is only one poly group. All I did was split it into 3 and then it worked beautifully. Now, a big part of this lesson that I want to talk about with you guys is when it doesn't work. And I actually don't have a perfect solution to this. What I tried to do initially is to make a tentacle brush out of this. And I did so with like varying success. I'll actually do a demo for how to create a tentacle brush after this lesson. Going to show you what I struggled with. So one of the things that I learned is that here's my bad example. So the reason this is a bad example for making a triparts brush is because if you look at the back here, or somewhere on this, maybe not. Anyway, see how my poly groups are completely straight and they're flat? So when they piece together, they'll do a better job. So for my bad example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control W. And I'm going to put like a notch in it or something. I've noticed that when it's not completely even or if there's issues, it does not work as well. So again, I made this really notch uneven, Control W. Masking this as well. Going to put some notches in it just to make this a bad example, Control W. I'm going to laugh if this works perfectly. From what I noticed last night, if these lines don't line up, it's not able to stitch itself together, which kind of makes sense. So now that I have this bad example for my triparts brush, I'll click on B for brush palette, create insert mesh, click new. I'll go back to the female head here, click on stroke, curve mode, brush, weld point stretch, and max these out. So many steps, I know, but once you get used to it, it's not too bad. So let's see how this looks. I'm gonna laugh, it looks perfect. That was way too small, so let's make that a little bigger. Cool, it's doing a bad job, which is kind of what I was hoping for. So see how there's these holes right here? That's because it's not able to stitch itself together because as you see in my bad example here, it has all these different notches and stuff. So if you want to do this, you don't just need 3 poly groups, you need them to be able to stitch themselves back together. I'm really glad that worked because again, last night was a struggle. I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. Because what happened last night, when I was trying to learn how to do more advanced techniques for the lesson today, I was using Dynamesh because I was sculpting it. So what I did is I went to Dynamesh, and you'll see immediately I already have this little poly group kind of jumped up here and again on the other side, and it's not completely even, and this is causing a lot of problems. So what I did to fix this is I made my tentacle brush using subdivisions. So I did my Z-remesher to make sure it was as grid-like and as perfect as possible, and then I went through and sculpted it. So let's do this as like a trial tentacle brush. I'm just holding control to mask out some dots here, making sure not to put them on the seams, otherwise they're not going to line up very well. It's not great, but it's just for a demo. Holding control and alt, and then clicking control and tapping off the model to invert the mask. Holding control and dragging this to inflate them a little bit. And now we have a very odd looking tentacle, but you get the point. I'll explain why I didn't taper this in just a second. Alright, so now that we have this little like trial brush here, I'm actually going to lower the resolution because I don't want ZBrush to crash. I'm at 500,000 points. If I draw this into a brush, it's going to duplicate each middle section and be at like 5 million points, and I don't want it to crash. So even though it doesn't look very nice, I'm going to lower the resolution just for the sake of this demo. Alright, so again, now that I have my piece and I see that I have my 3 different poly groups, I will click B for my brush palette, create insert mesh, click on new, and go back to the female head. Now let's see how this looks by default. Of course, it's doing this block thing. So again, go to stroke, curve mode, brush, click on all your little buttons, which is weld points and stretch, maxing these out, and let's see how this does. It did a good job actually. I'm really glad that these stayed together. Obviously, it doesn't look like a great tentacle because I didn't shape the back and stuff, and because it's not pointed. So, kind of a trick that I learned yesterday, what you can do, is if you go to stroke. If you go to stroke, and then click curve functions, I think. No, curve modifiers. Sorry, this is new to me too. So again, go to stroke, curve modifiers, and the first graph here, and just kind of put a nice curve in here. And then go to flip horizontal, this F, capital H. And then make sure you click on size. That's going to tell ZBrush that towards the end of this brush to taper off. You'll see how it looks. And you'll see it looks much more triangular. And so it looks much more like a tentacle. If I go ahead and go through here and pull this more over, I'll get a more or less dramatic, depending on which way ZBrush is reading it. So as you see, this one drops off extremely quickly. So in other words, the bigger this curve is, the less dramatic the drop off is going to be. And the reason I do this instead of sculpting it like that is because it's a more consistent trend. So each tentacle will taper off in the same way despite being different sizes. Otherwise, it might look really uneven. So if I didn't have those weird square edges, this would actually be a very good tentacle brush. Obviously, there's a better way of doing this little section cups as well, but you get the point. I know that was a lot of information, and it feels really fast. That's why I did it a bunch of times. But the general process here is to make a model, whatever you want your curve brush to be, with good topology, and most importantly, having these very, very even polygroups. And again, you polygroup by holding control. Whatever area you have masked, when you hit Control and W, it's going to change the polygroup. Once you have your piece, click on B to go to Create Insert Mesh. And then all of these modifications, which is going to stroke, make sure you go to curve, and then going to brush, modifiers, clicking on those buttons as well. And then it will work, probably. It's a process. All right, I think that's pretty much everything. There is a few more things I wanted to share with you guys, just like general tips and tricks, but they're not related to curve brush modifier. So I'm going to read any comments or questions you guys have, because I know that this can be a lot, and we'll work through those. Terry says, once you've made those modifications under stroke, does it save those settings to your brush, or do you have to save it as a new brush? You pretty much have to do it every time, but it should save it to that brush. But yeah, every new brush that you make, you have to do it again. If you were to set this up as a macro, it should keep your settings every single time, but I don't make brushes that often for that to probably be useful. But yeah, I see Val says, can you anchor one end of the curve to another mesh? And then thumbs up because he saw that you can. I'm pretty sure you can do that and tell it to not just having the brush, but I did not. Here we go. Under curve mode it says lock start or lock end. I'm pretty confident that's going to do it. Let's go to that brush and go ahead and check out the settings. Yep. So it's lock start is how he did that. So stroke, curve mode, and then lock start or lock end if you want the ending to be locked to the mesh. I didn't know that, but I'm glad I was able to figure it out on the fly. Let's see. How long have I been talking? 20 minutes. My goodness. Usually I'm not as long-winded. That's okay. I try to keep these lessons very short and sweet because if you're anything like me, I only can get so much new information at a time. But if there's anything that I did that you didn't understand, please let me know. So again, like a recap, we went over how to make like bandanas, how to make hair, and then potentially how to make a tentacle brush or something like that. I think those were all helpful. Since there's no other current questions about curve brushes, I'm going to throw some like little tips that I found out recently. So something that's really, really cool is that, say if I was going to mark like tribal markings on her that were like scars, I can grab a clay build-up brush and draw like a swirl or something. But let's say I did that swirl, but my Z intensity was super low, but I was super happy with the way that it looked. If you want to repeat your stroke exactly without touching your model, click the number 1 on your keyboard and it will repeat that stroke, which is really cool. There we go. So I'm just clicking number 1 on my keyboard. It's pretty cool. And then another cool thing that you can do, let's say that your Z intensity was fine. You made this swirl on her face or whatever, but you wanted to do this exact same swirl on other places on her face. If you hold Shift and 1, wherever your cursor is, it will repeat that stroke. Just some cool tips that I learned recently that I feel like would have really helped me if I had these in my workflow earlier. So there you go. Those are some cool tips. Another question. Val says, so if you were doing big chunky cartoon / anime hair with this sort of brush, how would you do that? I really just prefer sculpting hair in sections and doing a lot of it with the move brush and with, what brush? Clay buildup. But you could make this, I'm trying to think of like how anime hair looks and what you're talking about. You have to like really spiky, defined sections. Okay. What you would do is very similar to my tentacle brush I did here. It would be very, very important that you would go to stroke here, go to curve modifiers, and have this taper on there because they have those very dramatic, defined chunks. So essentially what I'd recommend for that is you would build up one piece. And I'm doing this by hitting backface mask, which is located under brush. Come on. Brush, auto masking, and it's right here, backface mask. So what that does is it lets you add volume and move volume, but it doesn't grab the other side of it. For example, if I don't have backface mask on, it just grabs the entire thing, which obviously you wouldn't want that. For hair, you want to add volume. So essentially, I would just make one very good looking piece. And then I would duplicate that. It's just being tricky. But yeah, I would just make one good hair chunk essentially, and I'd use that trick where one second, I have to make this its own piece. I think you get what I'm saying though. I won't go too far in that demo actually. I'm getting off track. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. You make one good one, and then you'd have to just manually place every single piece of hair. Just make sure that similar to the tentacle brush, you go to your stroke palette here and have that size drop off so it tapers at the end of a really nice like end. But again, I really don't recommend just using brushes to create hair. It's very tedious, and it's not going to look as natural and as flowing. I know most anime hair doesn't, if you're doing like that really like typical male spiky hair, but you get the point. Let's see. Terry says, wow, that'll be handy. And Michael said the same thing. I'm glad that is handy. And yeah, I felt like betrayed when I figured out the strokes thing with 1 or shift 1. And I swear I'm going to forget that I'm able to do that. But for stuff like facial markings, I feel like it's going to be so helpful. Because usually I will do something like that and then be like, oh goodness, I want that exact same one. I'll try and sculpt it exactly the same. But by clicking one, you can actually do it exactly the same. If I'm not mistaken, that number one trick actually applies to any movement in ZBrush. So if I like turn my camera a little bit and click one, yeah, it will keep turning my camera in that exact same increment. The more you know. I actually have a little pink book that I'm working on where I write any tips that I have, and I try and share them with you guys. So I'm going to look through here and see if there's anything else in my little book that I jotted down that would be helpful. For most of it, it's just stuff that I was trying to learn. Yeah, we've gone over edge loops already. We've gone over, I don't know if we've gone over surface modifiers. That would probably be a good lesson for next week. I'm still working on figuring those out all the way as well. I think we're all good. All right, Val says Leth had a question. Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry. Said, if you place an object for a curve brush, then set another curve, is there a way to reselect the previous curve brush for further modification? Yes. Yes. Oh yeah, there was something big that I totally forgot to go over. I apologize. So if you go to your curve, like let's grab my curve snap strap brush. Oh goodness, what is that? That's not what I wanted. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh goodness, why is it doing that? This should just be a normal brush. I think I've just added so many modifications to my settings right now that's acting really weird. So let me reopen this demo file and try this again. So what I'm trying to get to is that, oh wow, it's still doing that. Guys, what is going on? So I have this is the brush I've been using since the very, very beginning, and it's been quite difficult. Curve mode was not on. There we go, I figured it out. Curve mode wasn't on. Anyway, so when you draw a curve, you'll notice that it has this dotted line here. If you change the size of your brush and go back and tap it, it will make it larger or it'll make it smaller. Very, very important. I forgot to mention that earlier. I do apologize. And then specifically, you mentioned if you could go back and reselect the previous curve brush for further modification. And the answer is yes, because if this curve is still here, then yes, you can. The only reason this curve will go away is if I tap somewhere on the model. So see, like I just clicked somewhere on her chin here, and it'll make that line go away. But if not, you can keep, or if you add another curve. So I would recommend keeping all of your curves separate. When you split them, it makes it go away as well. But I've gone so far as to like duplicate parts of my model just so I can make sure I keep that dotted line there. For the most part, I will just redraw it if I forget to do that. But yes. Something else that's kind of cool, if you have a dotted line there, you can actually change it. Say if I did, we'll do an actually practical example here. Let's say I wanted to give her some sort of like interesting headdress or something. And so I went through and I put some sort of like bandana on here. Why is it doing this? Really weird glitchy part. ZBrush. Behave, I'm doing a live demonstration. I've actually never seen it do that until doing it live, of course. Anyway, let's say that I have this. And if I was like, you know what, this little leather strap is way too boring. I want to make it scales instead. So if you grab a different curve brush and then tap on that curve, it will then add whatever that brush was. There are a ton of curve brushes in ZBrush, so this can get very quickly out of hand in a cool way. Here we go. This is like a power cord. Whatever you want. Anyway, I hope that was helpful and that I answered your question. There's a lot of information in this live stream. Goodness. Also, I saw earlier that Terry mentioned the echo is because the video is also open in Discord, which I found very funny. And no problem. Vala says, is this good for feathers, or would you place feathers some other way? This is very, okay, so I don't use a curve brush, but I do make insert mesh brushes. So I'm working on some client work right now that I don't know if I'm allowed to share, but I don't think he's going to see this. Anyway, I'm just going to open up the file, but please don't tell people I'm working on this. This is secret. But it's just so relevant to this feather question that I have to bring it up. All right, I doubt he's being mad. This client's super cool to work with. All right. So I am working on an owl bear for a client right now, and I started working on this yesterday, and all of these feathers were made by only one feather. He looks so funny and blocky right now. I'm very proud of him though. All right. What I did is I made a single feather. Gasp. Did it my one feather not save? I made sure to make it like its own piece. There we go. I was going to be very, very sad for a second there. So I have this feather that I made very quickly. And then I went to B, create insert mesh, and then clicked new. And then what I did is I have a like basic wing shape. Here we go. So I'm just hiding all these other feather sections here. So I have this basic wing shape that I made, and then I just literally drew on these feathers. Obviously, I did some tweaking to them. What I frequently do is I will go to deformers here and go to bend arc, and then bend it or taper it. That's actually like 2 lessons ago is modifiers, in case you're in deformers, if you weren't sure what I was talking about there. But yeah, this is extremely helpful for feathers. That isn't how I did the feathering on the chest. A lot of it is sculpted by hand, but that can be a very, very quick technique to get that all done. This is going to look super cool when it's done. I doubt he's gonna be mad that I shared that. I just want to make sure. Depending, the company might buy commercial rights for it, and they're going to get it injection molded, so you might see it everywhere. But if they don't purchase commercial rights, it will be coming to patrons. And I kind of hope that happens with the owlbear because it just looks really cool, and I want to share it with you guys, but I can't. I won't know if he buys commercial rights until September, because that's when they're testing injection molds for it. But yeah, woo. Speaking of, since we're kind of on a tangent here about commercial work, I know a few of you guys are pursuing this professionally. If you guys want me to do a lesson based on how to handle clients and be professional, I can do that as well. For example, this is what I sent my client. I do this reference sheet of work in progress so they can see what the model looks like and give me feedback. I can talk about how I construct these and whatnot. But that's a side thing of like just being a professional artist and whatnot. I know it's kind of cool, like see behind the curtain sometimes. I have no problem talking about how I price things, how I work with clients. I say no to a lot of commission jobs. So I could go over that as well in a future lesson if you guys want me to. So yes. Yeah, it's been a half hour. Thank you guys for joining. I really do appreciate this is kind of a longer lesson. Again, I really try to keep them short and to the point and put a lot of information in here. But yes. Derek says, very cool. Val says, thank you. Glad that was helpful for all you guys. So does Leth. And if you guys have any other questions, it doesn't have to be on the lesson or anything I've talked about. As long as it is somewhat remotely ZBrush related, ask me. I have no problem answering questions even from the very, very beginning. I've had a lot of people join Learn 3D Model Tier within the last month, like 20 to 50 of you guys. So if you guys are here and just don't know what's going on, I can give you a quick intro to the beginning. If not, I'll probably sign off in about 5 minutes. But again, thank you guys for joining. I see Zaxa said hello earlier on. Hello. Michael says, thank you, Mia. Yes, you're welcome. I'm excited because I'm like worried about calling you out. I don't know why. Michael is doing this professionally, or going to be, hopefully. And I've seen a lot of his work in Discord. If you guys haven't checked it out, you should. It looks amazing. And I want to help other aspiring professional artists as well. So I was pretty much thinking about Michael and August specifically. But yes, I'm sure there's others in the Discord that are doing this professionally or hoping to as well. Terry says, great lesson. Thanks, Mia. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, this was a fun one, for sure. And thank you guys for bearing with me for not doing it last week. I had done 16 lessons in a row, and I was kind of tired, and I just don't have my normal setup, and it's kind of hard to live stream like this. So I should get it on the 10th, so just in a couple days. I'm very excited, and I'll be live streaming regularly again. But looks like we are all wrapped up. There's no more questions. Of course, if it comes to you after the fact, you can always message me in the Discord, and I'm more than happy to help you there as well. I want to say thank you to, I think it was Valis, who suggested doing like a tentacle brush tutorial, and I was like, you know what, that's curve brushes. I can totally do that as well. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I say that all the time, but I really do appreciate you guys. And I will see you next week. Bye, guys.